Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Belaine from Point Reyes Books. We're very happy tonight to have Alec MacGillis talking about his new book, Fulfillment, Winning and Losing in One-Click America with Farhad Manjoo. Before we get going, a few things I'd like to go over. Alec and Farhad are going to talk for probably about 40 minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to your questions. So at any point during when they're talking, if you have a question you'd like them to get to, there's the Ask a Question box at the bottom of your screen. So just put your question there, and we'll get to it a little later on in the event. But at any point, just feel free to put some things there. Or if you want to chime in on the chat screen, tell us where you're watching from, feel free to do that as well. There's also, if you haven't already, at the bottom of your screen, the green Buy the Book button. And this is a really amazing book. I just finished reading it and definitely would highly recommend, and I'm sure you'll want to get it yourself. So if you haven't already, you can buy the book with that little green button down there. I also want to let you know about a few more upcoming events we have. This Thursday, April 15th at 7 p.m., Jonathan Myberg will be discussing his new book, A Most Remarkable Creature, The Hidden Life and Epic Journey of the World's Smartest Birds of Prey, with Point Reyes Books owner Stephen Sparks. And then on Tuesday, April 20th at 7 p.m., Beronda L. Montgomery will be discussing her new book, Lessons from Plants, with Crystal M. Fleming. And then on Thursday, April 22nd at noon, Rebecca Solnit and Icelandic writer Andre Magnusson will be discussing his new book, On Time and Water. And all these events are on our Crowdcast page, so feel free to subscribe if you don't want to miss anything, or subscribe to our newsletter. And I'll put the link to the newsletter in our chat there. But without further ado, let me introduce our guest tonight. Farhad Manjoo became a Times opinion columnist in 2018. Before that, he wrote the Times State of the Art column, covering the technology industry's efforts to swallow up the world. He has also written for Slate, Salon, Fast Company, and the Wall Street Journal. To his chagrin, his 2008 book, True Enough, Learning to Live in a Post-Fact World, accurately predicted our modern age of tech-embedded echo chambers and alternative facts. Farhad was born in South Africa and emigrated with his family to Southern California in the late 1980s. He lives in Northern California with his wife and 2 children. He'll be talking tonight with Alec MacGillis, a senior reporter for ProPublica and recipient of the George Polk Award, the Robin Toner Prize, and other honors. He worked previously at the Washington Post, Baltimore Sun, and the New Republic, and his journalism has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, and other publications. His ProPublica reporting on Dayton, Ohio, was the basis for the PBS Frontline documentary about the city. He's the author of The Cynic, a 2014 biography of Mitch McConnell. He lives in Baltimore, and tonight they'll be discussing his new book, Fulfillment. So let me turn it over to you two.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
Yes. Hi. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And thanks so much to Emily in the bookstore and to Farhad for joining me tonight. I'm really sorry I couldn't be out there for this. This book is about places, and so it's really too bad that I can't actually go to places to talk with everyone about the book and about the places that it's about. But hopefully, maybe on a future paperback tour, I can come out. And I'm very grateful that we can at least have this tonight. Stephen, the owner of the bookstore, was actually one of the, I think maybe the very first people outside of my family to sort of reach out to me before the book came out. He somehow got a copy on his hands on an early copy, and was just very, very excited about the book and very supportive. And so it's great to get to be here tonight. The independent booksellers have been just huge supporters of this book, which has been really, really heartening. The book is, as you know, I think some of the wonderful columns and reviews so far have made clear, including a great column that Farhad had just a couple days ago, is about Amazon, but it's about much more than Amazon. It's about the sort of the regional inequality that has developed in this country, disparities around the country that I've been worried about as a reporter for many years, going around the country and saw just how unhealthy they were for this country, how much they were kind of driving our politics in a really kind of toxic direction. And I wanted to write about them. And after the Trump election, I decided to write about them. And then a year later, I kind of settled on Amazon as the frame for the book. And we can talk later about why I settled on Amazon as the frame. But one of the key things about this regional inequality that I find so worrisome is that it's unhealthy for both sorts of places. It's unhealthy for the sort of winner-take-all cities that I write about in the book, which in the book it's Seattle and DC, but of course the Bay Area is probably the ultimate example of that sort of place. And then it's also, of course, unhealthy for the left-behind cities. The one group of places deals with unaffordability and congestion and displacement and loss of character. And the other set of places deals with abandonment and despair and blight and decline. And it's all out of whack. The imbalance is really not healthy for the country. Before Farhad and I start talking about the book, I thought I'd read a short passage that's set in Seattle, and I think it applies very much to the Bay Area as well. And it's about the moment after the Amazon successful effort to get a tax repeal. There was a tax passed in Seattle back in 2018 to help pay for more housing and homelessness services. And Amazon, after agreeing to a sort of lower level of the tax, launched a big effort to get it repealed successfully. And so this passage is about the sort of aftermath of that fight and the sort of toxic politics that came in during that fight in 2018. And it refers to a woman called Katie Wilson, who's an sort of leading young activist in Seattle who fought for that tax. And but it starts with a description of an incredible documentary that aired in Seattle, aired on the conservative network in Seattle, the Sinclair-owned network. And the documentary was called Seattle is Dying. And it was this very kind of propagandistic film about homelessness in Seattle and the decline of Seattle. And it aired after this vicious tax fight. So here we go. This is from chapter 7. It's a chapter called Shelter. The film, if one wanted to call it that, opened with a shot of a homeless encampment, tents, trash, east of Interstate 5, across from the stadiums. The camera pulled back and upward to reveal the city skyline beyond, cut to a shot of a white man, a bandage on his neck, sitting in an opiate haze. What if Seattle is dying and we don't even know it, began the voiceover. This story is about a seething, simmering anger that is now boiling over into outrage. It is about people who have felt compassion, yes, but who no longer feel safe, no longer feel like they're heard, no longer feel protected. It is about lost souls who wander our streets untethered to home or family or reality, chasing a drug which in turn chases them. It's about the damage they inflict on themselves, to be sure, but also on the fabric of this place where we live. This story is about a beautiful jewel that has been violated and a crisis of faith amongst a generation of Seattleites falling out of love with their home. As the narrator spoke, the images unspooled, the homeless in heroin stoops, the homeless lying sprawled on the sidewalk, the homeless struggling to pull up their pants. This was the opening to Seattle is Dying, an hour-long documentary on the city's homelessness crisis that aired in March 2019 on KOMO, the local ABC affiliate owned by Sinclair Broadcast Group, the nationwide chain with a strongly conservative bent. From the opening montage, the video moved through a string of interviews with those, quote, people who no longer feel protected, small business owners losing goods to shoplifting or losing customers to the stink of urine, a neighbor appalled at homeless desecrating a cemetery, a veteran cop who quit in despair over being powerless to address the problem. I couldn't do it anymore, he said. There were numbers too, numbers showing that Seattle was now second in property crimes only to even more dystopian San Francisco, where 5,000 homeless lived on the streets, and where in 2019, a man would make himself into a viral sensation by dumping a bucket of water onto a homeless woman. And numbers showing how few crimes were actually prosecuted. One homeless meth user who'd been arrested 34 times since 2014 was highlighted and shown refusing to climb out of a trash can. And numbers showing how much the area was spending on homelessness, $1 billion per year. They live in filth and despair like animals, and we allow it, said the narrator. But there was a solution. The narrator took the viewer to Rhode Island, which he said was having great success rehabilitating drug-addicted drifters in prison. And then the scene shifted back to Washington State, to an overhead shot of a group of buildings on a lovely island in Puget Sound. It might have been a resort, but it was in fact a state prison, sitting mostly vacant, just waiting for Seattle to do its homeless the favor of locking them up there. A city is a living thing. It has a rhythm and a heartbeat, a soul, the narrator concluded. It is a collection of ideas that we protect and defend, old ideas and new ones. But behind the beauty and the ideas and the ballparks and the beautiful buildings, the dirty work is the fight. Great dreams and great cities don't survive without a fight. Seattle is dying. Maybe with all the wealth and growth, we became so pleased with ourselves or so busy that we forgot about the hard part. Maybe good people who go to work every day and raise families and pay taxes, the ones who built the city and dreamed the dream, forgot about the dirty work. Maybe we forgot about the fight. One might have thought that a city that gave Donald Trump only 8% of its vote in 2016 would have recoiled against what was essentially a conservative propaganda film. Instead, the city was riveted. Less than half a year later, Seattle is Dying had nearly 5 million views on YouTube. Katie Wilson was not surprised by the response. Even before the documentary aired, she detected a rising sourness in the atmosphere. Instead of simply pausing the debate over homelessness for the time being and clearing the air, the city council's repeal of the tax had fed the forces that had led to the repeal. It had made the council, already derided as misguided, appear feckless as well. Any notion that members might have had that voting for repeal would ensure their preservation was revealed as naive. Opponents of the tax, fueled with the same business backing that had funded the referendum push, were now gunning for a wholesale jettisoning of the council, not only those who had voted against repeal, but all those who had voted for the tax in the first place. But the shift in the air was about more than the 2019 council elections. It was about an allegedly progressive city coming to terms with the fact that if the pre-repeal polls were to be believed, a solid majority of residents had accepted the argument that their government was too broken to tackle a problem it had been elected to address. To an outsider, the anti-government sentiment was particularly odd given how well run the city seemed to be compared with so many others. Its bus system was extensive and heavily used. City Hall was spacious and gleaming. Corruption was minimal, but somehow one of the most liberal cities had lapsed into a local variant of Tea Partyism, a resentment of the grasping other, and this was key, it was not going to apologize for that. I'll pause there, but I do think that that passage could apply to some other cities in the country that have been experiencing what I call sort of the effects of hyper-prosperity and the sort of some of the toxic politics that can come with that.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the Bay Area, and everything you described there is the story of of the Bay Area. It's also DC. It seems like we're having this kind of like I remember after the Iraq War, Donald Rumsfeld said that they're having catastrophic success in Iraq, and it seems like that's what we're having in many places, around the country. We're so successful, but that success is sort of creating all kinds of just terrible consequences, side effects, and for various reasons, it's just getting impossible to live in these places.
Yes, exactly. No, it's really, it's not good for either side, really. And I think
So
no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think there's some kind of lag here, but so let's start talking about Amazon and the most recent news about Amazon, which was this union vote. Last week, the unions, the employees seemed to vote down joining the union, and this was a very sort of high-profile effort at this warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama. And I think that a lot of people thought that this time would be different, that Amazon has crushed these union efforts for essentially all of its life as a company. But this seemed to have extra momentum, and it was national news, and President Biden supported it, it seemed to really have kind of momentum. And it turned out it seems like the vote wasn't even close. Like the opponents of unionization far outnumbered the supporters. Were you surprised at the outcome, and kind of what do you make of it?
I was not that surprised by the outcome. I mean, maybe a little surprised by just how wide the margin was, but I was cautious about weighing in on it in the weeks before the election, before the results came out, because I was not down there, and I wish I had been down there, but I'm always cautious of sort of spouting off of things that I'm not reporting on myself closely. But I'm talking to sort of labor folks in the weeks leading up to it, there was definitely a sense that some of the buzz and the momentum, the talk of momentum, some was a little bit excessive, and that it was overlooking some basic obstacles and realities. That notably the fact that right off the bat, Amazon had succeeded in a very crucial thing, which was greatly broadening defining the election unit of eligible voters very broadly, including even some sort of supervisor types, and defining much more broadly than the union had bargained on. And so they had a certain number of cards in support of a vote, and usually you want to have way above half of eligible workers at least supporting the idea of an election. They ended up with less than half because the denominator got so big. And there's even been some second guessing now about whether they should have gone ahead with the election, knowing how tough the odds were. You had Amazon, as usual, of course, very effective at all the different tricks of the trade. You know, the mandatory meetings with workers, just this relentless hammering of an anti-union message, even arguing that you're going to be paying your dues for nothing, when in fact it's a right-to-work state, so workers actually wouldn't have to pay their dues if they didn't want to. But just very good messaging, very aggressive messaging, and real fears on the part of workers that the Amazon was going to shut down the warehouse if they voted for a union. And then I think something else that doesn't get talked about a lot, but is, I'm sure, part of this is something I saw talking to workers around the country at Amazon warehouses. Just it's the diminishment of expectations among workers these days, where for a lot of workers, this is just this job they're going to do for a little bit. Turnover at this warehouse is about 100%, like it is as a lot of warehouses. People stay for only a year at most. It's just a job you're doing for a while to make some money, and you're going to go on. This is not something you're expecting to build a career over. The notion of turning this into something that is more sustainable and that you could sort of support a family on or do for a long time and have some real meaning in, where you might want to have the union to make it something more sustainable, is something that a lot of workers don't even, doesn't even cross their mind. So the stakes are enormous. This is in all these fights to come, because Amazon has now gotten so big, that this is what the future of work looks like in America increasingly. Like that we've moved on from the big factories and steel mills. We've moved on from the shopping malls in a lot of cases. You now go, if you're looking for a job without many skills, without much college degree or anything, you go to the warehouse. They hired 400,000 people just the past year. This is now the reality of work, of working class jobs. And so if you want to lift it up, if you want to lift those jobs up, this is where you got to start.
Yeah, I talked to a bunch of Amazon employees over the last few weeks, in kind of the run up for this vote. And one of the things that kind of surprised me was, a lot of them pointed to the turnover at these warehouses, and they were talking about how it's sort of very good for Amazon, and the fact that no one knows each other, no one gets a chance to know each other. There's just very little chance for kind of socializing. Many of the jobs are isolated, and so kind of organizing, just basically communicating, is difficult, and kind of organizing in that environment seems impossible. I guess I wonder, it's interesting because these are the jobs that sort of replace, the kinds of manufacturing jobs we used to think of, which were high-paying, long-term jobs. What is it about American work, and kind of what has changed that leads a company like Amazon to create jobs that are disposable in this way, that neither the workers nor the company really think of this as kind of long-term work?
No, it's such an issue for organizing efforts. That atomization of the work, and it's not just that the workers are so transient that they don't get to know each other, but also that the actual work while they're there is so isolating. Like you're at your spot with the robots, or you're over here packing boxes on your own. You're really quite spread out, and people have gotten even more spread out during the pandemic, because jobs used to be done by a couple of people together were now turned into one-person jobs to space people out more. So it's a very atomizing job. I was talking to one former worker recently who said, I was talking about the fact that mill workers used to roll out of work and go for after shift go to get a beer or 2 beers or breakfast together at the diner after night shift. And he said, yeah, we would never do that I would never leave work from Amazon and go have a beer with Joe, because I have no idea who Joe even is. Like Joe, he might be 50 feet over there. I have no idea who he is. So it's all just a much more atomized kind of work. It's important to keep in mind, though, that those manufacturing jobs were at one point themselves much lower paying, and much in a way like shared a lot with these warehouse jobs now, much lower paying, no say on the job, crazy productivity demands, crazy hours, just also pretty high turnover actually in sort of the early days of manufacturing before they unionized. It was the unionizing that helped to sort of lift them up and make them something that people actually stayed at longer and sort of were more sustainable. So in a way, we're sort of at this point in the cycle now where we're back to square one in a sense. And then so the question is, can the cycle turn again for these workers, and so these jobs become something more sort of middle class and family life sustaining? But
what do you think
skeptical.
What do you think the kind of union effort goes now after this kind of big defeat? I talked the union people were telling me last week that they'd gotten a lot of interest from other warehouses, from even workers at other companies, that this had created real kind of an effort to start these unionization efforts at in many places. But if this didn't go well, I imagine that kind of interest might die down. What kind of other effort could they, what else could they do in this environment?
It'll be really interesting to watch now. I think it's too early to say that this was some kind of big devastating setback. It might actually have been the loss that kind of feeds into future action, and because there has definitely been just scrutiny was brought to what things are like in the warehouses through this campaign, and it definitely did, I think, light a bit of a flame in other places. What you're hearing talk about now when I talk to the labor folks is the notion of doing more, not just organizing for elections, but also more organizing for sit-down strikes, walkouts, various kinds of work stoppages that don't necessarily immediately feed into a fight for a full election, because this has been a reminder of how tough that is. And it's tough partly because of how our laws are written right now. We've known this for years now, ever since like the Taft-Hartley Act passed in the early 50s. It's been really, the laws on organizing are definitely tilted to the employer, and the Democrats can never manage to get a filibuster-proof majority to change that. So it is tough. So there's talk about these other kind of actions where you're still trying to organize workers, draw attention to conditions, and then just try to keep the fight going that way. Iowa, the Teamsters are trying to launch something like that in Iowa right now. So that's probably one area to keep in mind, to keep an eye on. But it's also worth noting that the other big front right now is an antitrust, and I think it'll be. And it'll be interesting to see. There's been some talk of trying to yoke together those two fights, where Nelson Lichtenstein, who's a big labor expert in California, he suggested basically threatening major antitrust action against Amazon in Washington, making that a very credible threat, to the point where they say, okay, to spare ourselves getting broken up, we will behave much better with our workers. And there would be a big debate about that, because that would then still leave them entrenched as massively dominant and arguably monopolistic. But that could be an interesting yoking.
And there is a lot of movement, or there's some kind of prominent movement on the antitrust front. Joe Biden's sort of nominee for the FTC was this woman named Lena Khan, who kind of pioneered this, a real antitrust fight against Amazon, or just a reading of the law that suggested that Amazon could be a monopoly in a way that I think a lot of people in the antitrust world have been skeptical of until recently. Amazon, when you talk to them about antitrust, they point out that they're not the majority of sales in retail in the country, although they are getting very close to the size of Walmart right now. But there is Walmart. There are other competitors. And they argue that kind of it's a stretch legally, and they do have kind of years and years of kind of lax and corporate favoring rulings on their side. I wonder sort of how long you think this effort on antitrust might last, and whether there may also be some kind of lots of hurdles here too.
I'm actually more right now. I think that the antitrust fight probably has a better shot than the like actual union, union election fight. The signs are just are that the Biden administration seems to be taking this really seriously and is willing to actually part ways with the Obama administration, which was notably lax and cozy with tech. And that which Lina Khan's nomination, the point of bringing Tim Wu, another very strong antitrust voice, into the White House, just a lot of signals being sent, and then of course also Biden's video, for the workers, that this really there's going to be it's going to be very interesting to watch, and what is essentially an intra-democratic fight here, where you have the basic kind of like Democratic affinity for big tech, for Silicon Valley. A lot of money, most Silicon Valley money goes to Democrats. Most tech, Bay Area votes go to Democrats, and then just generally Democrats as a whole, voters as a whole. It's not just the elites. Voters as a whole have a definite affinity for Amazon, especially. There's that famous poll from a couple years ago showing that Amazon is the most trusted, admired institution among Democrats in this country, ahead of the press, ahead of local government, ahead of unions. And so, but now you have some voices within the Democrat. You have Lina Khan and Elizabeth Warren and a whole bunch of people who do think it's time for a reckoning. And so it'll be fascinating to watch how this plays out within the left, essentially.
Yeah, I think one of the major difficulties in either antitrust or union fight or some other effort against Amazon is that I think there's a real split in, people have these public policy views about corporate size and influence and how they treat their workers. On the other hand, even before the pandemic, Amazon was just an extremely convenient and easy way to kind of arrange your life, especially in places that tend to be, liberal-leaning, high, successful places. In the Bay Area, like everyone around me gets Amazon packages all the time. The trucks are everywhere. It just seems like it's become this really deep part of life for people. And then the pandemic kind of just, entrenched that to a level that I wonder, I wonder how you think people are going to deal with that split, because it's different from I don't know, the cigarette industry or the oil industry, because here people have a real close connection to the company, and I think many people kind of like it as a company to deal with.
Right, and this is why I wrote a book about it, because the people you're writing about are in a way the most target audience for the book. It's the liberal-minded, well-educated, upper middle class, blue metro living consumer who buys a lot of stuff from Amazon. This past year, just astonishing, right? I mean, what happened this year was just an embrace of just, if there had been any compunction before about it, it was just out the window. You had this feeling of permission, you had permission from the authorities. You could no longer, it wasn't just that you were buying from Amazon without compunction, it was almost with virtue, right? It was an actual sign of virtue to be buying all your stuff this way. And so the result was astonishing. I mean, 40% greater sales over an already huge base, having to hire 400,000 more people, 50% more warehouse space, Bezos's personal wealth up 58 billion. And then you see it viscerally, right? You see it when you're on the highway and you just lose count of all the trucks. You see it in the boxes in the alley on recycling day. You see it, just all those gray vans up and down your streets, or in the cities, just the boxes piling up on the sidewalks. It's and it'll be very interesting to see like what comes out of this. If people, if we stick with that embrace of that scale, or if there is some kind of a moderation and a move back to essentially to not just cutting back on the Amazon, but just a re-engagement with our communities and in the physical world around us. The move to Amazon was strongest, and generally the one-click life was strongest in blue areas, because blue areas took a much higher assessment of risk from COVID, and so embrace the one-click thing much more, and we're relying much more on this sort of delivery class of people to bring things to them. I started talking about the Amazon coalition, which is essentially, Democrats are becoming, in some ways, the party of highly educated, upper middle class people in blue metros who order a whole bunch of stuff on Amazon, and then also the mostly Black and Latino people who package and deliver things and bring them to them. And that's an awkward coalition to hold together. Like the people buying the stuff and the people who bring you the stuff. It's pretty upstairs downstairs.
One thing that at the same time that the pandemic kind of got us shopping from Amazon, I think that there was a new kind of spotlight on what it's like for delivery workers, what it's like for warehouse workers. I think that kind of the fact that people were at least thinking about this idea of essential workers during the pandemic gave us, a lot of people a sense of, sympathy, but also just like, this is I think it highlighted the awkwardness that you're talking about. And in that way could start some kind of political movement. It just seems like we are talking about these things in a way now that I don't think we were before the pandemic. It's sort of much more, because it became so salient, it's become kind of a point of discussion in politics and like in society. I think we were talking about kind of our addiction to Amazon and other tech companies. So yeah, how do you think it changed, like the pandemic changed the politics of this?
It was heartening on the one hand to have people talking about the essential workers more, but the fact is that the numbers remain. I mean, they were talking about them to some degree, even as they just ramped up their embrace of this whole kind of daily routine in much greater numbers. And so it's, yes, there's been somewhat more, kind of guilty talk about it, but at the same time, they just got so much bigger and more powerful this year because of the choices that we made, choices that were arguably, even in excess of what was really necessary from a strict sort of, epidemiological standpoint, and so. So I really think this is such a key moment now, and basically whether there's some kind of a pullback from that full just hunkering down, just all online kind of life, or whether we are going to see some kind of a moderation. And I've certainly not been out there like calling for a boycott or anything like that, or it's all, I use them when I have to, that kind of thing. But it's just about generally. The book is in a way just showing you what is behind that one click, all the consequences, not just for the workers, but also for your cities, for the small businesses, for the very really kind of shape of our entire landscape, of just this division of cities into winner take all ones and left behind ones, and just to get people thinking more about making the connections and just have it be a somewhat more urging us to be somewhat more conscious kind of citizens in the places we live, and thinking about how what kind of flows from the click.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned the word guilt, and I feel like that is something that I've been feeling, or at least thinking about a lot recently. I think after the union effort in Alabama, and sort of just kind of more talk about these workers. It's something that feels kind of more present when you're browsing the Amazon site or about to press the one-click button. But it's been difficult for me to figure out kind of how to deal with that guilt. You point out, we can shop at local stores. That I think that's fine, but one of the things that's happened with the pandemic is a lot of local businesses have closed down or have become delivery businesses themselves, like restaurants have. And so and those workers, those services are also provided by big tech companies. And I had a sense sometimes in talking about Amazon is like a lot of the patterns that exist at Amazon exist at other large retailers, but and I wonder sometimes if it's possible to escape kind of the horrors of what happens with the one click on Amazon versus the horrors that happen with the one click on Walmart or just any other kind of retail experience. If is sort of like this miserable way of like managing retail, is this something kind of embedded now in like American business and culture?
I mean, look, there's been great forces reshaping, everything in our world. Technology, e-commerce, these are all larger forces, globalization, all larger forces. But I'm a very firm believer that we all still have agency. And I get a little, I think that a lot of sort of liberal wonk types have a tendency sometimes to start ascribing too much to the larger systemic and structural forces, and sometimes leave out the personal agency and also corporate agency, because this kind of talk is essentially what I'm hearing from Amazon themselves, where they say, look, this is the main thing I heard from them actually in all my discussions with them. They said, look, there's all these bigger things happening in the world. We know these jobs are not great. We know none of this is ideal, but this is all just bigger stuff that's happening. And if it weren't us, it would be someone else. It'd be some company called something else. It just happens to be us. And whoever comes, and that's their line. And it's a pretty striking line of defense of themselves. But that's what it boils down to. And what that overlooks, of course, is yes, there are these larger forces, but they do have agency, and there are specific things that they've decided to do over the years that have made some of these problems especially extreme. It was an especially aggressive pursuit of tax avoidance at all levels, especially high demands on workers in the warehouses that have really kind of transformed warehouse fulfillment work to a degree that that other companies had not done, and it made them especially grueling places to work. And then another obvious decision was their decision to put their second headquarters in Washington, the richest city in the country, instead of trying to do some small part for the rebalancing of prosperity across the country, and put it in St. Louis or Cleveland. But they didn't, because that's not how they think. And so I do think that we have to be careful not to get too fatalistic, and which basically just ends up letting not just ourselves off the hook, but also them off the hook.
Yeah. Sort of moving off Amazon for a second, but talking about these larger forces, what kind of regulatory or kind of other effort by Democrats, especially at the federal level, like what could you do to rebalance prosperity from these, to make it more equitable around the country? The Biden administration has this $2 trillion infrastructure bill. I wonder if you think that changes things, or what else do we need to kind of make America more prosperous, kind of more equally? So
this is the key thing. I believe that this is what the book, in a way, is like. The book's not an argument book, a solutions book, but implicit in it is this notion that antitrust that regional inequality is connected to antitrust. That actually antitrust is not just going to help you break up the big giants, but it will actually have a geographic effect. That it will help to some extent in dispersing prosperity across the country somewhat more. That one reason we have such concentrated regional inequality, regional concentrations of wealth, is that we have such economic concentrations in certain markets, and that you have a lot of all this retail activity, commerce that used to be spread all around the country now flows to one city, Seattle. All this media ad revenue that used to be spread all around the country now flows to Google and Facebook, control 60% of that market. They're in San Francisco, they're in Bay Area, and you end up with just these crazy concentrations. And it's so I really do believe that itself would do something. The fact that this is, I think so much about the Baltimore, Washington example, because and it applies elsewhere too, but it's so close there, that we're having all these fights in Washington about housing and affordability. And do you build more supply, or do you have rent control, right? It's the same fight you're having in San Francisco or Seattle or Boston. And there's a vicious fight within the left about what to do about that. What that misses, of course, is that one reason you have such incredible unaffordability in these cities is that you have so much concentrated prosperity, growth and prosperity in them. And that if that growth and prosperity were spread out a little bit more, it wouldn't be as acute a problem, and it wouldn't be as vicious a fight. And that it's basically insane that right now in Washington, you're fighting about how people can afford an $800,000 or $900,000 row house, when just up the road, 40 miles away in Baltimore, we're demolishing them by the hundreds and thousands. And then it will get even worse now, because Amazon's putting its second headquarters with 25,000 jobs in Washington. And so I wish that broader context of the role that economic concentration plays in the winner-take-all city problems was something we thought more about. There are other things that, yes, the infrastructure bill would help, no question. When you spend on needy things that the country needs, some of that spending will happen in places that really need it. So anything that lifts all, that's all good. But at the end of the day, antitrust itself would have, I think, would have a real impact in this regard.
Yeah, we can talk to the audience about if anyone has any questions. We're happy to talk about them. So I think you can just type your question in at the bottom, and we will get to it. What was Amazon's response to your book? Like, I think that they, you point out a lot in the book, and I think this is true in my dealings with them. They're one of the most kind of secretive companies that I've ever sort of dealt with. Apple is a very secretive company, but Amazon is like opaque in a way that I think is very frustrating to reporters, to kind of anyone who wants to figure out what this company is doing and the effect it's having. How did they respond to your book, and have they said anything since its publication?
No, it's been really interesting. The whole experience of dealing with them has been very odd, I have to say. Just first of all, just when I first reached out to them in like maybe March of last year, when I really knew what I needed to ask them about, and they initially just blew me off really for quite a while. It was odd, like they just didn't take me seriously at all, and I kept sort of urging them to engage, and then they finally blatantly engaged, and then when they finally engaged, they then belatedly got very worked up about the book, and we're so we spoke quite a lot, and they like really the main line was what I sort of said, which is that, look, we know this is all not great, but this doesn't really have anything to do with us. It would be someone else if it wasn't us, and then also sort of a sense of, look, these jobs are better than nothing, right? At least when we, in our dominance, unlike Google and Facebook, we're actually hiring people all over the country for these warehouse jobs, which of course overlooks the fact that those jobs are in a sense replacing other jobs. They're replacing the wipeout in brick and mortar has been just incredible. We don't talk about we talk so much about coal miners losing their jobs, but the retail salesperson has been by far the hardest hit, category in the country. And so it's not like these jobs are just coming fresh from the sky. There's a broader context of job loss that exists. But still, that was also one of their main arguments, that at least we're when we come to a place, we're better than nothing. And but and then as far as what I've heard since the book, it's been radio silence. It has been just complete.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. And the book's for sale on the site. I ordered a copy from them just for kicks. Pre-ordered it just to see what would happen. It was actually very odd. The book arrived a week late, and so
wow.
yeah, the algorithm didn't like me. But your point about the secrecy is so important. I mean, one of the things that comes across so much when I was doing all the reporting was this again and again, this emphasis on secrecy, whether it's especially we saw especially was just in their dealings with towns and cities about all the tax subsidies that they're trying to get from them and always successfully getting from them, where there's just this insistence on towns having to pledge secrecy and then even apologizing in moments where they actually have to cough something up to the local press, to the extent there even is any local press anymore.
I found that the parts of that process they have for dealing with cities, just one of the most depressing parts of your book, because the kind of obsequiousness on the part of the cities is just astonishing. And I mean, even in that kind of contest they held for their second headquarters, even New York was just kind of falling over to get them. Cities that you would think would be kind of above begging Amazon, but it's just unbelievable how these cities kind of go after this, and it turns out in a lot of cases that it seems like it's either not worth the breaks that they're giving them, or it's often kind of oversold, right?
Yeah, no, it's the obsequious is just the right word. It's that there was that one moment that I found I was actually there for. It was when Baltimore was getting its first warehouse, and they had a grand opening for it. It was on the site of a former General Motors plant, and they had the mayor there, the then mayor, and a big local congressman, both Democrats, and they were just praising the company to the sky, not just for bringing these jobs to Baltimore, but praising them as consumers. It was all, thank you, Amazon. You're the one who gets me my deodorant on time. You're the one who gets me my skin lotion on time. It was just this. It was stunning. Like this, how that consumer mindset of the convenience and seamlessness and frictionlessness had sort of imbued even these municipal officials as they were handing over. In that case, was $43 million in subsidies to a warehouse, to a company that needed to build a warehouse there no matter what, because they need them in certain places. Right. And then with HQ2, yes, it was even more grotesque, because you just had this sort of sweepstakes nature to it. But this is what happens when you have the giants, because the giants, what they were offering was so massive. I mean, they remember initially they were offering 50,000 jobs, and then it kind of got broken into 225s. But you just, so it becomes this. You almost, how can you not at least try to go after that? How can you not prostrate yourself? Because my God, what a thing this would be for us. But it's just another sign of things being completely out of whack.
Yeah, we have a question from the audience. Could there or should there be an extra tax on e-commerce? Might this be a way of helping bricks and mortar stores and reducing geographic inequality?
That's a great question. I mean, this gets to the heart of the matter. This is one big way that Amazon got as big as it did, is that early on, for many years, it had this massive advantage because it was not having to assess sales tax. And that's why it went to Seattle in the first place instead of the Bay Area. Because if it went to California, it would have had to assess sales tax in California to all those customers, and it didn't want to do that, so it went to Seattle. And then it's kept not putting warehouses in certain states, big states, because it didn't want to have to assess sales taxes in those states, until it just got to the point where it kind of had to go everywhere to make the one-day delivery happen. So the key now with this sales tax, they are now finally at least assessing sales taxes, but there are all these other e-commerce companies that are not. There's this whole kind of gray area now that's come out of. There's a Supreme Court ruling a couple years ago that basically said that states, can require sales tax on e-commerce sales elsewhere, and but there's now this, it's all kind of limbo about how do you actually go about collecting those taxes, and how do you go about, just do you really go after really small companies, sort of arts and crafts company that's selling stuff online, or just go after the big guys? And Amazon's played a very interesting game in this, where at first it was, of course, trying against taxing e-commerce sales, but now sort of kind of came out in favor of it once it started doing so itself. It wanted everyone else to have to do it too. But as far as Amazon itself, ways to come after them more, to sort of level the playing field, one way to do that would be to stop giving them the massive subsidies for the warehouses. And right there, that would be a way of sort of somewhat leveling the playing field with other kinds of retail. Right now, they're basically getting this massive subsidy through all those incentives that they get when they come to town.
Yeah, and is there, they're still opening new warehouses. They still have to be in new places. Is there a sign? I'm learning that there are some other questions. Okay, let's get to those. Alec, do you find there to be a generational correlation among folks on the left and their relationship to Amazon? Or is there a similar devotion to the company among different age groups?
That's a great question. I think, yeah, I think anecdotally, my sense, and I think this is borne out, sort of market data, is that definitely, sort of one-click kind of habits across the board are stronger among younger people. It's kind of stands to reason, just more at ease with the technology, more likely just to have the phone, all that, and just much less willing, fewer habits established with sort of brick and mortar kind of habits established from many years of living. And in that sense, unlike, Facebook, which famously, kind of skews older because, the kids are too cool for it, I think Amazon definitely it is much more an intuitive kind of move for the younger demographic. Although I think I'm also hearing that the pandemic changed that to some degree, because it made it for older people who felt even more need to sort of hunker down. Older people who maybe before hadn't gone the Amazon route realized how convenient it was, and that a lot of their growth this past year actually came from that end of the scale.
Yeah. Another question is, speaking of personal agency, aside from taking our shopping elsewhere, what else can each one of us, not only as consumers, but as agents of change in our own right, what else can we do to help shift the direction of where we're all headed? I think with regard to Amazon.
Yeah, I think, not to be a broken record, but again, for people as citizens to start thinking about antitrust monopoly as a major issue of our time, and really start voting on it, or sort of thinking about it in a way that you do about other major issues that you care a lot about. This is not something that I think comes intuitively for a lot of people to be. It's a big, it's a strange word. It's sort of abstract seeming, and so a lot of people are not sort of pressing their representatives on it the way they might, something like healthcare, education, but actually that it's something that people ought to be thinking more about, and sort of drawing the connections, and just how much this is now shaping the way we live in the places we live in, and just to make that an issue. And then I would just say also that I do hope that the book leaves you also with, just generally as citizens, not just a better understanding of antitrust and monopoly, but and its effects, but also just a better understanding of people elsewhere in the country. That this book really is, in some level, a book about different places, and just these huge gaps that have grown up between us, gaps in prosperity, really, and just to give people somewhat better understanding of what life is like for that guy who's making the cardboard boxes in Dayton, Ohio, and he's making $11 an hour, and his life has been unraveling for him, and and his dad owned a trucking company, but now here he is at age 28, still making cardboard boxes for $11 an hour because everything's kind of fallen apart there. And there's a whole chapter in the book on that guy and his family, and it's, his life is very difficult and it's not pretty. But this book is partly just to make us all somewhat more sort of thinking and empathetic citizens toward people elsewhere, even people, you know, who are different politically than us, because they are connected to us through these things. That he's literally the guy making that box that shows up on your doorstep.
One of the things that I think that's one of the interesting things. I feel like I have no real connection to the people who bring me stuff from Amazon. The drivers, as I understand it, are mainly contractors, or many of them are. And it's not like it's sort of like you get the box, you don't really know where it comes from. It's sort of, there's kind of like a magic associated with it. I think what you're trying to do is kind of peel back on that whole process.
Right, and also just show how much has been lost in this new mode that we live in. I mean, the fact is that I mean, you know, I'm not a great fan of shopping malls or big box stores by any means. Walmart did all sorts of devastation to our country, but the mode of physical shopping, of having to fill our needs, at least by somehow going out of the house, going down the street, did mean somewhat greater human interaction. You were actually seeing, to some degree, people who are not like you, people different class than you, having some interaction with that woman at the cash register. You know, oh, what's that pin you're wearing? Oh, it's for my kid's school. Oh, you know, now we have nothing. Like, you probably didn't even look up from your laptop when that guy brought the box. Maybe you gave him a wave.
Right. If we have any other questions, we have a few more minutes, so it would be we can answer anything you want. One thing I found interesting is you talked about the workers' interactions with the robots, and a lot of us have the sense that robots in technology in our lives or in our jobs are supposed to make things easier. It's amazing how much more difficult and dangerous the robots made working at Amazon at the warehouses.
Yeah, they really did. It's, I actually have to credit your Times colleague Noam Scheiber for this. He made the observation a couple years ago in a piece that with the growth of the robots in the warehouses, that work itself has become more robotic for the workers that are left there. And the best example of that is what's happened with the pickers. The pickers are the famous, sort of the category of workers there that we know most about. People used to have to roam the aisles looking for stuff, and that was a really tough job. You had to just walk tons, many miles a day. But there was at least some kind of autonomy in it, and some kind of self-directedness and independence of a sort. And there was sort of a hunt to it. And now the robot, most of the warehouses, the robots bring the stack of the incredible things. They're called the kivas, and they're like ottomans, like low ottomans, and they have big stacks of shelves on top of them, and they swirl all around this large space, somehow manage not to crash into each other, and then the pickers just stand there in a fixed spot all day for 10 hours, and then the robots zoom over to them with the shelf that has the drawer that has a given item, and they pick it out. And now the demands for picking items, of course, are much higher, because they're bringing the stuff to you. You don't have to go looking for it. But so now you're having to pick 300 items an hour, roughly, just boom, 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 boom. And the robots are driving your work in a way. They're your taskmaster, because they keep coming. And so you have to keep up with a robot, in a sense. And you're only still there. You have not been replaced by a robot, only because they have a hard time getting the robots to grab things. That's been a hard thing to teach the robots. So you're there essentially. You're there for your grabbing hands, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems like this kind of process where technology kind of makes us faster, but that adds, this grimness to the job, and this idea that you don't have a boss that is a human, and then your boss is in some sense an algorithm. I think it's it's going to a lot of different kinds of jobs. And I found that to be kind of a very, like a dystopian kind of picture of the future of work, is that, we will answer to algorithms and kind of computerized quotas and things like that, rather than kind of having any kind of real discussion with a human being as your boss.
Right. No, it's completely atomized. I mean, this is what the one of the central characters of the book is this former steel worker who goes to work at a warehouse after 30 years at the steel mill, and the warehouse is on the exact same piece of land as the steel mill used to be. And one thing he just couldn't take was that kind of this kind of automated algorithm surveillance type of system where they knew exactly how many pallets he was bringing in off the truck with the forklift, and then the supervisor would be riding him right away if he was falling behind. And then of course he had trouble with the bathroom breaks. He was older guy, didn't have enough time to go to the bathroom, and it was just a huge struggle for him. And he just found it. This is a man who spent 3 decades at a really, really tough steel mill job, got injured a bunch of times. It was really tough, scary work often, but he lasted for that for 3 decades, and he basically liked it because it had purpose and camaraderie, and he's making something. And then here he was, just moving around, a bunch of stuff made in China, essentially, as fast as he could up with the forklift, and he couldn't hack it for more than 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, and even 2 or 3 years is sort of long at these places, right? It sounds like people surviving 6 months there is like you're a veteran.
Right. He really needed the money because his pension had been cut in half after the steel mill went out of business. So.
Yeah, I think we have a comment from a reader. In the Ask a Question box, it says, say something nice. So I'll propose that perhaps in the way that things have changed via e-commerce, not just via Amazon, things will change it other huge ways with the brand new industries that will be necessary in the future in order to survive climate change. It's hard to see the detail of the future, but one thing that we all know is that things change. I mean, along those themes, like, do you see other companies, other forces, things like climate change, kind of changing how Amazon works? Is there some sense that, are there any competitors to Amazon? Will things change in a way that makes Amazon kind of the Walmart or the old-fashioned retailer of the day?
There is a notable competitor that's come along, and I don't get into this in the book too much, but and I have to be careful. I don't want to sound like I'm like advertising for them or anything, but it's striking to see this one rival emerge now, and it's this company called Shopify, and they are essentially offering themselves as a way for small businesses, or not so small businesses, merchants who have stuff to sell, to sell stuff on their own, directly on websites of their own, direct to the consumer, without having to go become third-party sellers at Amazon. I mean, the big move in recent years that's made Amazon even bigger and even more profitable is that they basically coaxed all these merchants to feel that they have to sell their stuff on Amazon, on the marketplace, as it's called at Amazon, where there used to be just that Amazon would get stuff from wholesaler and sell it on the site, just the way that a department store would. But now you have all these third-party sellers who sell stuff on the site, essentially using Amazon as their platform, and they have to then pay Amazon massive fees, massive commissions, often as high as 30%. And it's been hugely profitable for Amazon to do this. They're way more than half their sales now are from those third-party sellers, and so. But now all of a sudden there's this other option. Shopify, it's a Canadian company that they have no platform like Amazon. They simply help you get your site in shape so that you can be running it smoothly and selling stuff off of it directly without having to go the Amazon marketplace route. So that's been interesting to see that kind of competitor emerge. But otherwise, I really would say that the most interesting arena right now is Washington, that there really is something happening there on the antitrust front. And what's notable about it, I didn't say this before, is that there's potential for possibly some kind of consensus, bipartisan, that consensus that Republicans have their own motivations for distrusting big tech, and we can debate whether those motivations are how justified they are, but they do have these motivations, and you could see possibly there being some kind of agreement around reining in the giants.
I mean, it seems like Amazon, though, is aware of that, right? Bezos has bought a house there. He bought the Washington Post. It seems like this is a new front for them.
Yes. Yeah, I'll just say that's a big part of the book, because the Amazon takeover of Washington has been remarkable to watch, and the book is partly intended to expose that, because there's not been enough reporting on that. Partly because he owns the Washington Post, so that's been a tricky story. It's been a tricky story for them to write about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that feels like kind of a good stopping point. Thank you both so much. If you haven't bought the book already, again, fulfillment, the buy the book button at the bottom of your screen there. And this event will be recorded and available on our Crowdcast page if you want to watch it again or share it. And thank you both so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
That's brilliant.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.